we go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm excited about talking to Ethan today. So, Ethan, your startup is like 2 years old. Mach Industries is 2 years old. You're competing with companies that are decades old. You just got your first Army contract. Do you ever find it hard to be taken seriously by some of the government folks?
I don't think so. No, the fundamental fabric of warfare is changing so much right now towards unmanned systems, and I think the warfighter understands that more than anyone else, and so I think the space as a whole is very much shifting right now, and that makes it very easy to be taken seriously as someone building the right type of solution.
Has anything changed after your first contract? Has that been a big change?
Yeah, I mean, I think talent gets easier to hire. Obviously, capital is easier to raise, but I think the fundamental nature of what we're building is the same.
What about, is there any generational gap, sort of like a lost in translation when you deal with old, stodgy government folks?
Not really. I actually think the perception of government as stodgy is wrong. I think you've actually got a lot of people who are very much, in many cases, especially in the Pentagon, motivated the right way. I think the emergent effects of a bureaucracy are always a slow-moving, difficult to interface with machine. But I actually think the individuals, or especially in the Pentagon, again, are there in large part to serve their country and are, again, more acutely aware of the need than I think most people are. And then we've also hired folks that have done this before, and so it's rare that I'm approaching these people alone. And then another kind of key part of our strategy is to actually have things flying, to have factories built, to have things we can point to before we talk to these people.
Makes sense. Is there anything that surprised you about the bureaucracy?
It's changing a lot. I think 2 years ago, if you would have asked me, I would have actually expected it to be pretty stale, pretty stagnant, and not change much. But yeah, I mean, everything is shifting right now in the government, most specifically in the Pentagon. I mean, literally the name changed in the last few months.
Right. So how is it? So you're saying that in the last 2 years things have changed in terms of how the bureaucracy works. How's that been? There's a new administration. Has that changed anything for your company?
Yeah, new administration has. I think the biggest driving force for the change has been the style of platforms that are actually effective on the battlefield. If you look a decade ago, it was primarily large, multi-million, multi-10 million, multi-$100 million manned assets. If you look at sort of the major ongoing near-peer conflict right now in Ukraine, I forget the exact number, but it's somewhere close to 80 to 90% of operations are being conducted by unmanned systems. And so you've got this effect where the fundamental nature of what you're fighting wars with is shifting. Because of that, what it means to build these systems, what it means to buy these systems is pretty radically changing. If you look at the F-35, that was like a 3-decade, $1.7 trillion program where the government went and wrote requirements, they went through a full fly-off, they literally took decades to perfectly architect this thing. If you look at the current state of conflict, it's very different. The Ukrainians and the Russians, the systems they fly are changing on a weekly basis. It's a constant loop of iteration, and then you've got various flavors of systems like these fiber optically controlled drones that have just never existed before. And so the way procurement looks has to radically change, right? Like we're actually using different procurement mechanisms. Obviously the nature of the systems we're buying is different. In many cases, I mean, one of the things we do as a company is we kind of build to our own requirements. And so this is a very different thing than what's happened historically. Instead of waiting for a few years, 5+ years in many cases, for the DoD to write a requirement for what they need, we look at the state of conflict, we talk to the actual warfighters and release something ourselves, and that's a very different style of procurement. So it's pretty radically changing across the board.
Have you found more willingness to work with startups since the new administration took over?
Yeah, and I think that's actually quite bipartisan right now. The primes are good at a lot of things, but there's definitely a very urgent need for companies to be able to rapidly ship unmanned systems at scale, specifically those that create an offset, and by doing so a deterrence to China. And so, yeah, I mean, I think across the aisle folks realize that.
And let's talk a little bit about what you're doing. I think you have 3 products right now: Glide, Stratos, and Viper, which is the one with the Army contract. Can you tell us a little bit about what they do and at what stage they are at this point?
Happy to. You care if I step back real quick and just talk about the way we view warfighting, because I think it's important to understand the reason we're biting off our specific products. So if you look at Ukraine, the big thing you see is a proliferation of smaller less centralized, and then actually less survivable assets. You're deploying tens of thousands of things to do mission sets that used to be done by one or two manned assets. And so you're seeing this much tighter iteration loop. I think the best way to describe it is basically these kill webs of systems where each one is seeing, talking, and shooting, as opposed to having a helicopter doing one specific thing or a tank doing one specific thing. And then as we look at combating China, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, if we're building a quadcopter and China's building the same quadcopter, if we're building a cruise missile and China's building the same cruise missile, we will not be able to provide effective deterrence to them. They'll produce many times more than we do, right? And so I've spent a lot of us have spent a lot of time thinking about how you solve that problem, because we also don't have a tech edge. It's not like we can out-iterate them on advanced computer or other things right now. And what I've come to is the best answer is rate of iteration and innovation on things that basically identify gaps in their style of warfighting. So if you look at the American system, we're a capitalist democratic system. They're a totalitarian communist system. They have the power, because they're totalitarian, to direct massive amounts of resources on things that we can't. And so we can't beat them brute force. The one thing that America and this city specifically is very good at is iterating very quickly and being creative with solutions. And so our big focus as a company is to realize how fast warfighting is changing right now, to try to and do our best to basically look at the future of what that looks like and pull specific of those capabilities left to find very specific gaps. And so that's sort of the background of how we arrived here. That's what the company was started to do. Our specific platforms, to walk through them. So first we have Viper. Viper is about a 6.5 foot long vertical takeoff fighter jet.
Like a drone, essentially.
It's a drone, but it flies up to 50,000 feet. It's fast. I mean, it's jet powered, and it has a several hundred mile range. It's meant to do a lot of what a traditional manned fighter jet would do. And so you and I could actually deploy this thing right now. We could go set up 10 of these things and launch them, and then do ground to ground, which is what the Army put us on contract to do, or surface to air. Again, various things that you would do with traditional aircraft, but it's about 3,000 times cheaper than a lot of the manned aircraft the U.S. deploys right now. It's significantly easier to produce at scale. We'll be announcing a factory sometime in the next few months to do literally tens of thousands of these units a year. And then really, really, really importantly, probably most importantly, is decentralized. So instead of being able to take out one fighter jet, you have to figure out how to take out 3,000 of these assets, each flying several hundred miles an hour. And then instead of having a runway to take out, you and I can launch this thing out of the back of a truck, we can launch it out of a garage, we can launch it off of a small unmanned surface vessel. So it's a lot harder to deal with as an adversary.
And it's one use, right? Or can
right
you
now.
get it back?
Right now. So I mean, the hardware architecture, you can certainly land it. Right now, it's about 10 times cheaper than a lot of the missiles you would drop off of a manned fighter jet. And so right now, there's really not a pressure to use it other than one way. And then specifically for, as we look at deterring a conflict in the Pacific, the ranges you're dealing with are quite insane. And so being able to go one way is actually a pretty big advantage there. But yeah, that's the first product. Next product is Stratus. So this is a weird one, but it's basically a high altitude balloon that can navigate and station keep for many weeks. And so you and I would deploy this. Winds actually crosshatch at altitude. And so by changing altitude, you can get into different wind layers and actually navigate and carry sensors. And so with Stratus, we can talk to other Stratuses, we can see from Stratus, and then we can actually launch things. And you're up at super high altitude, where it's like 100 times more expensive to shoot these things down than it is to put them up. So you and I could deploy 100 right here, station keep them anywhere on Earth, and then actually bring them back, which is a huge unlock, right? Again, the main thing about the Pacific is the tyranny of distance, and so this is a huge advantage, and we'll be able to manufacture a ton of these as a company. Glide I can't talk as much about, but it's another basically one-way effect with pretty extreme range.
Is that the one that also combines Viper? Because there is one that is designed for that, no? Or
No, different. So yeah, Glide's a different platform.
And so is Viper the priority right now because it's the one with the contract, or is it close to being deployed?
So we actually have more than one contract. So we've publicly announced one, but we have other products as well that we haven't publicly announced. We'll be
anything that you can talk about right now?
Not at this point.
Okay. Sounds good.
But yeah, there are a bunch of different focuses.
Obviously the government has the reputation for being slow and not as fast as innovating as Silicon Valley. But there are good reasons too. We're talking about systems that, some are surveillance systems, but some of these systems are designed to kill. So you want them to work flawlessly. How do you balance that? Like you promised to make weapons faster and cheaper, but also you need them to be safe. How do you do that?
Yeah, it's a super important balance. I think you have to test often, very often in a super safe environment. So the first thing, you've got to be able to manufacture enough systems to test them repeatedly. You've got to be able to get on very large test ranges with safety teams that allow you to test quickly. We have a really robust, no, I wouldn't say really robust, we have a robust simulation environment and tools that we can basically assess the reliability and basically the likelihood of these systems working before we test. And so you have to attack it from first principles engineering. Like the answer to engineering safety is rarely compliance, it's rarely policy. It's almost always really robust engineering and being able to validate that engineering at every step.
Does the government have requirements for safety that,
Yeah,
you know?
they do,
Yeah.
they do. They have requirements for everything.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. A lot of red tape. At a previous TechCrunch event, I think a few months ago, with a colleague of mine, you said that you never want to be in the position to decide whether, you know, a weapon system makes the decision to kill on its own, and that the government should make that decision. Do you still believe that?
Yeah, I do.
And why do you believe that, I guess?
Yeah, I believe in the U.S. Constitution, and I think a world in which specifically the defense industrial base is influencing the U.S. Constitution is a really dangerous one. Obviously, there is complexity in that because we do write the software that controls the systems, but at the end of the day, it should be the warfighter deploying the kinetic systems.
Do you think there will always be a need for a human in the loop, or we'll get to a point where
So
that can be?
I actually think those are two very different questions.
Okay.
So first, I would say the U.S. actually already deploys a lot of systems where like there isn't necessarily a human in the loop. Like we've been firing artillery shells that we don't know exactly where they're going to land for many decades at this point. I think there always has to be a very, very clear decision for a human to send a system. And then the government's job, not my job, the government's job is to write the policy for what that system should do.
Yeah, I guess some critics could say that you are in the position to make that call if you make a system with the software and, you know, the features that allows the government to say, okay, this drone can decide who to kill. You know, would you take that decision off the hands of the government?
Well, the first thing is I can't, right? So I can't deploy systems that the government hasn't signed off on. And the government has regulating bodies to regulate these things, so that's not my job. I can say that it's a really tough question, and one I'm not looking to shy away from. I'm happy to keep talking it through. The fundamental issue here is that in a wartime environment, the ability to communicate with a system is extremely, extremely challenging. You've got the curvature of the earth to contend with, you've got jamming to contend with, you've got scale to contend with. A lot of these radios cost thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. And so the really scary position the US will find itself in is where an adversary deploys a system that is fully autonomous, and we don't have that system. And so that is like an unfortunate truth we all need to think a lot about and talk a lot about. I would say for me, like my job is to build systems that match the policy of the government. My job is not to influence that policy, but my job is that if the US government, if in our democratic system through the Constitution, we decide that for the sake of the sovereignty of the United States, we have to deploy those systems, we will be in a position to deploy those systems.
And how do you deal with the problems that you just mentioned? You know, GPS is jammed, the internet is jammed, there's no communication.
Yeah, a bunch of different ways. So I mean, there are radios that are less susceptible to jamming. You have directional antennas that basically allow you to have different gains at different angles. There's different ways to do these things, but you can optimize your ability to communicate. A lot of times the Ukrainians actually deploy fiber optics, which is a great solution because you just can't jam it. The issue is, as we look at the Pacific theater, the ranges are a lot further. It's hard to drag a fiber optic 1,000 miles. On the navigation side, again, there are a bunch of different techniques. Probably my favorite is computer vision to navigate, basically looking at mapping tiles. This is tough over water. So you can start to do celestial nav and other things. You have a compass. You have what's called an IMU, basically an inertial measuring system that has accelerometers and gyroscopes that tell you where you are. So yeah, there ends up being, like, depending on the mission set, you've got in many cases, tens of these different systems that you have to combine and trust different amounts to get to the target.
And how do you, so you're building all this, you know, sort of redundancies within your web, you know, like for example, Viper have you been working on that?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that's very much the state of engineering that we're in right now. Like 6 months ago, the big thing was getting these systems to fly reliably, getting the mechanical design done. Right now, where we're at is really, really tuning the ability for these systems to perform well in an operational environment. In 6 months, it'll be how do we manufacture tens of thousands of these platforms?
And what happens next after 6 months? What's the next step?
Can I talk for like 2 minutes?
Yeah,
This might be a bit of a lengthy
Yeah.
answer, but I think it's really important that we all take this super seriously together. I mean, China has announced plans to be ready for a military invasion of Taiwan by 2027. I don't think any of us know whether or not that will happen, but in a world where that happens, the West overwhelmingly loses access to advanced semiconductors. The fall of Taiwan would in many ways spell the end of Western dominance and the start of a new unipolar world around the CCP. So the central mission of Mach through 2027 and beyond, because it doesn't stop there, is to deter China's ability to do that. We need to be able, like I said, to effectively create an offset by pulling that future left, to deploy enough of these systems that an amphibious invasion is unthinkable. Because if the US loses access to advanced semiconductors, we're in a really, really rough spot as a country. So again, right now, that's getting comms, PNT, autonomy dialed in. 6 months to a year is getting scaled production. Past that, we'll basically have all the portions of the Mach machine in place, and it becomes iteration rate and scaling as quickly as possible to continue to deter conflict.
Yeah. So do you yourself have a deadline for when Viper has to be ready? Or it depends on the government and the red tape and all the...
Yeah, it's a good question. So I mean, in some forms, Viper will be ready in the next 6 months, but these aren't static products. Like you're constantly taking the product and doing different things with them, surface to air, to landing. There will never be this version of like, this is Viper and it's done. We'll continue to iterate Viper for at least the next couple decades.
What do you envision the next Viper to be then?
I probably shouldn't talk about it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sounds good. So yeah, I mean, you focus a lot on Taiwan, but there are a lot of conflicts going on right now in the world. Obviously Ukraine, the Middle East, and for example, the Trump administration has been bombing and essentially executing alleged drug traffickers in the Caribbean, which critics have said that are illegal attacks. Would you be comfortable with the U.S. government using your systems for that?
I can say that the main two conflicts we're focused on right now are deterring a conflict in Taiwan and winning the Ukraine conflict. Like those are the two things we're focused on. That's what we build our platforms for. Our platforms aren't designed and frankly aren't meant very effective at other things other than strategically picking apart a near peer adversary.
But if the army had your Viper system, they could use it anywhere. You have no power at that point to stop them.
That's fair. It's fair. I would say there are certainly things I would draw the line on. But generally speaking, again, I do think it's dangerous for me in my position to be really looking to change the views of the government.
Yeah.
Like, I actually do think it's my job to be as bipartisan as possible, to have lines that I wouldn't cross, but then also, like, as we look at the current state of geopolitics, yes, the U.S. has faults, but we're very, very, very clearly a better aligned actor for the future of humanity than the CCP is. And at current state, if we don't figure out how to ship unmanned systems at scale, the U.S. will not be able to defend its interests against the CCP. So that is what I work on. That is what Mach works on. That is what we field our systems to do.
Yeah, you did mention that there are some red lines that you may not be comfortable with. Can you
Probably
elaborate?
shouldn't discuss them here. Sorry.
Why not?
Because I think there's a lot of other things to talk about.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people would have that question. It's a theoretical question.
I'll come back and let's discuss them.
All right. I think, you've said, I think it's on your website, and you said it publicly that, your target market is not just the US government, right? You talk about allies and Western edge. What does that mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it means Western allies. So there's a pretty robust process for ITAR regulation and for the allies you can and can't export to. And so basically for Mach to go sell platforms overseas, we need to go get approval from the State Department, Department of Defense, Department of Commerce, and a very lengthy process where it's reviewed by literally hundreds of people. And they're pretty selective about that. And so to countries like Ukraine, to countries like Poland, to countries like Japan, to countries like Australia, and there are a lot of countries that need deterrence right now against misaligned actors. I do see a critical part of our job is providing sovereignty.
So essentially you're saying that you're following ITAR regulations, and do you have any personal preferences or places you wouldn't sell to? Or like, do you have a list of allies, your own list of allies, I guess?
No, I actually don't, which could be taken the wrong way, but generally, again, I think my job is to trust our policymakers. I think it's very, very dangerous for me to become misaligned with the Constitution of the United States, for the general defense industrial base to become misaligned with the Constitution of the United States. I can say we design our products to do specific things. Like, our products are not designed for urban warfare. Our products are certainly not designed to go after civilian populations. Our products would actually be quite terrible at those things. The one thing our products are very, very good at are strategically combating adversarial militaries at scale. And so that's the choice we make, but it is my job to align to the policy of the United States.
So I guess we're talking NATO countries, that's fine. What about Israel?
It's a good question. I think it depends on what you're doing. So for sensing, I think that we can all agree that having more accurate munitions that avoid civilian populations is something that's worthwhile in almost every case. Again, we don't have products that are super useful in urban warfare. Like, there's actually not much you could deploy Viper against in that conflict. But I can say that Iran is a very, very, very key threat to the United States and to Israel and to the future of the West. And so we do take that threat very seriously as a company.
And so even like countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar?
So I'm happy to go down the list of countries. I can say that we have really, really big problems to solve as a country. Like, the position we're in right now is equivalent to being in 1965, and the Soviet Union has said that they're going to take 99% of the world's oil in 1967. And we can sit here and split hairs about these things, and I'm actually more than happy to do that. But the fact of the matter is that we as a country need to galvanize around shipping systems that are capable of guaranteeing American sovereignty. Like it or hate it, it is significantly better than the CCP system. And so that is what I'll talk about. That's what we work on as a country. That's what we work on as a company. That's what I'll build my products to do.
And when do you think is the year where we need that to be ready?
I think as soon as possible. I think by mid next year, we need to start having these platforms fielded. I think by 2027, we have to have them fielded at scale. It would be really stupid of us not to take Xi at face value when he said be ready for 2027.
And do you think that's realistic? Like, obviously you're just one startup. There's a lot of other defense contractors, but is there hope, I guess?
Yeah, I think there is. I think we need to take it super seriously, but I think there is. We're one company, but we also have really good allies in the fight. I look at folks like Anduril, I look at folks like Shield AI, I look at the primes. Like, lots of really, really good people are working hard on this problem. Now we are behind. The U.S. loses the war games we run right now on that conflict, and so this is why I'm here, is to have this conversation, because we need all the help we can get as a country. But look, I mean, we'll be announcing 2 factories in the next few months that'll build hundreds of thousands of these platforms a year at full rate. And the fortunate thing is we are on the defensive, right? If you look at history, most amphibious invasions have failed. And so there are positive things to look at. Again, I think the solution is asymmetry. The solution is being very creative, iterating very quickly, and pulling what the future looks like left. And I do think America is absolutely the place to do that. So I think we'll get it done, but we have to be clear-eyed about what the risk is, and we have to take it super seriously and work super hard.
And what's the next, you have a contract with the Army, some contracts that you cannot talk about, but what are you thinking about in terms of like what's the next agency that you want to work with, or that would make sense to work with? Yeah,
I think it's a joint emphasis. Like, Viper tuned to do different things is actually kind of equally applicable Air Force, Army, Navy. And so I think building platforms and then being able to very quickly tune those platforms to different warfighter needs.
That makes sense. Well, I think we're running out of time, so thank you for
thanks for having me.
Open conversation, and thank you everyone for coming.